Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining the JDCA for this remarkable day in celebration of the inauguration of President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. We begin in jubilation and celebration with one word, hallelujah, hallelujah. Join me. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Sing hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah. What a beautiful moment in time to be together in solidarity, in strength, in celebration of arriving at this remarkable day, in celebration of the inauguration of President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. I'm Alana Arian. I'm delighted to join you and to open the program today. And I'll ask you if you're able to please rise in body or in spirit for the singing of our national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please welcome Rabbi Sharon Brous.
Good afternoon, friends. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here with you with the JDCA. Thank you, Haley, Ron, Bobby, and to the whole team. In just 3 days, we will celebrate the inauguration of President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, and we will mark the beginning of a new chapter for our nation. Today, we're celebrating not only that victory, but also the extraordinary demonstration of shared values and shared commitment that led to the historic Senate victories in Georgia as well. When Reverend Raphael Warnock, who's a friend of mine, was elected the first ever Black senator from Georgia on the night of January 5th, he went on national TV and he quoted Psalm 30, verse 6, "Joy comes in the morning." The full verse reads, "Ba'erev yalin bechi, ulavoker rina." We may lie down weeping in the night, but joy comes in the morning. This is a bold and profound theological assertion. Out of your oppression will come redemption. From your sorrow, new blessing. From your degradation, dignity. And we are aching for that joyous morning. We are ready. But unfortunately, we're not quite there yet as a nation. Today, as much as we want to celebrate, as much as we need to heal, we are standing at the inflection point between that weeping night and the joyous morning, between a bitter end and the promise of a new redemptive beginning. Our work today, this week, and in the days ahead is to meet this moment with the full force of our spiritual, intellectual, and political will, to pull back from the abyss of deadly intersecting crises and begin to chart a new path for America. After 4 little girls were murdered in 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Dr. King famously said that we must be concerned not merely about who murdered them, but about the system, the way of life, the philosophy which produced the murderer. After the last 5 years and the last 2 weeks, surely we must ask the very same questions. The challenge of our time will be to resist the urge to place blame on one powerful man or even on his craven enablers, all of them guilty of fueling the flames of insurrection. The deeper question we must find the courage to ask is, what is the system, the way of life, the philosophy that produced the fire that threatens to devour our beloved country? Who is responsible? We're finally speaking openly now about the generations of heresy bearing down on our nation's soul, about the fact that millions of people have been taught that they'd be diminished in a more just, more equitable, more compassionate America. Raised on the heresy that God loves them more, they've become intoxicated by the lie of white supremacy, a spiritual cancer that has metastasized at the heart of our nation, drunk on a morally bankrupt politics that claims that patriotism depends on the suppression, criminalization, and dehumanization of fellow citizens. We must pay close attention to that heresy today, to the dangerous mainstreaming of a conspiratorial, misogynistic white Christian nationalism. It was on full display 2 weeks ago, and I'm afraid it's not going anywhere soon. That ideology, which has penetrated our society, demands a strong, unequivocal, morally courageous response. I pray today, on the cusp of this new chapter, that we not treat this moment as a dangerous anomaly. The only way we will heal as a nation is through truth telling. We have to be honest about how widespread the system, the way of life, the ideology is that led us to the point that we are in today. So, friends, I pray that we face this inflection point ready to do what it takes to usher in the dawn of a new America, a justice-driven, multiracial democracy that lifts up the poor and protects those most vulnerable, which is at the very heart of our Jewish values. A new America that abandons the false moral narrative, that allows us to prioritize profit over people, and instead affirms that every one of us deserves to live in full dignity. One that finally abolishes the heresy of white supremacy and enlists all of us in dismantling racism and lifting up a theology of radical equality. One that affirms that our highest calling as a nation is the sacred responsibility of caring for one another. Imagine all of us welcoming that joyous morning together, affirming our shared commitment to healing, protecting and sustaining one another and this earth. Joy will come in the morning. Remember that our rabbis taught that the deepest darkness is the moment just before the dawn. The contours of the joyous morning that we yearn for will be shaped by the boldest, most imaginative dreams that we allow ourselves to dream from within the weepy night. I thank all of you for fighting with all you've got to realize our shared dream of a new America that is built on love, that's rooted in justice, and that is propelled by our moral imagination. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Brous and Alana Arian, for your beautiful words and music. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Jewish Democratic Council of America's inaugural celebration, an event we're calling Democracy Wins because the win we're celebrating is not that of just Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, but it is a win for our democracy, our future, and all of us. My name is Ron Klein, and as chair of JDCA and on behalf of our board, it's my honor to welcome you here tonight. This celebration is a lot like many other Jewish gatherings. From Passover to Purim, we Jews are accustomed to balancing tragedy and victory, offsetting darkness with light. If the last few years, and especially the last few months, have shown us just how challenging the world can be, they've also shown us that change and progress in our great democracy are always possible. Because the same week that anti-Semitic rioters and white supremacists stormed the Capitol, Georgia elected John Ossoff, a Jewish son of immigrants, and Reverend Raphael Warnock, the Black pastor of Martin Luther King Jr.'s church, to the United States Senate. Because the same year that Donald Trump emboldened racists, xenophobes, and misogynists at every turn, Kamala Harris became the first Black American, first person of South Asian descent, and first woman to win the vice presidency. And because JDCA itself was born out of a moment of pain, when Nazis violently marched through the streets of Charlottesville and Donald Trump called them very fine people, that day we could have lost hope, but instead we took action. Together with a remarkable group of leaders from across the country, we formed JDCA to provide Jewish Democrats a national platform to give voices to our values and bring about political change. Since then, through sorrow and even sedition, we've worked tirelessly to elect leaders and enact legislation that align with our values. Leaders like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who through their words, deeds, and actions live by our Jewish values, and who, by the way, won 77% of the Jewish vote, in large part thanks to an army of volunteers mobilized by JDCA. We're so proud to gather here today and celebrate the inauguration of Joe Biden as our next president. He is a person with his competency and compassion who will turn a page on this dark last 4 years and lead us to a better day. We have great possibilities ahead as a result of his win, the taking control of the Senate, and the strong leadership of Speaker Pelosi. Because not only did Democrats win in 2020, our democracy won too. So tonight, we'll honor this historic inauguration with songs, speeches, and special guests from Washington, Hollywood, and Georgia. Sit back and enjoy as we celebrate our victories, but don't get too comfortable. Our Jewish Dems movement has just begun, and we're going to continue to look to all of you to continue to give voices to our values. Thank you.
At a time of rising bigotry and hate, at a time where we see so much injustice and division, we have to heal this world.
Prepare to vote. Vote like your future depends on it, because it does.
We need change at the top. Vote Biden.
We need to use our voices. More importantly, we need to use our votes. Joe Biden is empathetic and kind and competent.
This is a man who cares about other people. This is the type of person I want as my president.
JDCA has been a critical force for progress in America. You are uniting and lifting up the voices of millions in support of an agenda that is proudly Jewish.
Thank you, JDCA. You mobilized 2 million Jewish voters.
This organization, in a short period of time, has become vital.
I pledge to be a president who seeks not to divide, but unify.
Our democracy hinges on the Senate working with President Biden.
You've got young Jewish man, African-American pastor, running together with shared values, shared commitment. We need to help America to grow towards its highest ideals.
We're speaking about our highest ideals, and I'm grateful to the JDCA for adding their voices to that fight.
We are not exhausted. We are here.
If not us, who? If not now, when?
We don't agonize, we organize. And with JDCA leading the way, Jewish votes will make the difference. Thank you for your work and continued leadership for our nation.
Thank you, and hello from Washington, D.C. My name is Haley Soifer, and I'm the CEO of JDCA. I'm thrilled to be with you to finally celebrate. As Ron said, we're celebrating not just the inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, but we are also celebrating our democracy, which JDCA strengthened by translating our values into electoral victories in the past 3 years. When JDCA was founded in the summer of 2017, we had a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and an unhinged Republican president. And while we don't shy away from a challenge, we knew that flipping the House, the Senate, and the White House in just 3 years would be an uphill battle. But we organized. We poured everything we had into the 2018 midterm elections, helping to flip seats where the Jewish vote was large enough to make the difference, and it did. We flipped the House. Despite this, as we look to the 2020 elections, we knew we had our work cut out for us again, given the misinformation campaign emanating from this White House, legitimized by Republicans in Congress, the emboldening of white supremacy, anti-Semitism, and right-wing extremism targeting our community and others, ongoing Republican-led voter suppression, and a global pandemic that forced us to campaign without leaving our homes. And yet we persisted, we persevered, we prevailed. And here we are on the eve of the inauguration and the swearing in of not one, but 2 Democratic senators from Georgia, whose wins were both historic and monumental. Democrats will soon have control of the Senate, the House, and the White House. And these victories weren't the result of just one person or one miracle, though Mark Elias is about as close to a modern day Democratic miracle as you can get. No, we achieved these victories through the hard work because of all of you. Jewish Americans across the country stepped up to the challenge and got out the vote. In 2020, JDCA mobilized over 4,400 volunteers, including nearly 40 college fellows. Together, we targeted nearly 2 million Jewish voters in 14 swing states, sending over 650,000 text messages and making calls. That's on top of the nearly 300 events we hosted, not to mention a digital ad campaign that racked up tens of millions of views in just a few months. When we gathered in August 2020 for Take Back America on the eve of the Democratic Convention, I said the Jewish vote could prove decisive in flipping key swing states for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And that's exactly what happened. From the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt, the Bagel Belt, as we called it, our calls, texts, and ads made a critical difference in 2020. We made the difference in my home state of Michigan, where JDCA targeted nearly 200,000 voters, many of them contributing to Joe Biden's 147,000 vote victory. In a newly blue Arizona, where we targeted nearly 82,000 voters, and Joe Biden won by just over 10,000 votes. And of course, in Georgia, where our volunteers not only helped to ensure Joe Biden's win, but also flipped the Senate blue. In the weeks between the general election and the runoffs, more than 1,000 JDCA volunteers made 73,000 calls and texts to Jewish Georgians. We hosted 33 digital phone banks and events and ran over 4 dozen digital ads, reaching nearly 4 million voters nearly 4 million times. And we sent mailers to more than 50,000 households. The rest, they say, is history, literally. Senator Warnock will soon be the first Black senator from Georgia, and Senator Ossoff, the first Jewish senator from Georgia. And we have such nachas. We helped to ensure their wins and couldn't be more proud. Now, after nearly 4 years of hard work and 4 months of grueling, tireless, nonstop work, it would be tempting to watch the inauguration and admire the view. But as we saw on January 6th, the stakes are too high to let our guard down. Besides, as any Jewish parent knows, good enough just isn't good enough. We still have work to do. So here's what comes next. First, we're going to help Joe Biden carry out a Democratic policy agenda aligned with our Jewish values, or in his words, restore the soul of America. We know this includes efforts to combat anti-Semitism, systemic racism, and white supremacy, that protects Americans from COVID-19 and ensures access to affordable health care, that supports the US-Israel relationship, not through transactional, political, self-serving, or a partisan lens, as it was for Trump, but through the lens of furthering our national security interests as well as Israel's. And efforts that safeguard our democracy by expanding the right to vote and ensuring we never have a repeat of the past 2 weeks, let alone the past 4 years. Of course, in order to do this and to continue to grow our movement and influence policy at the highest levels, we need your support. You will continue to hear from us about ways to get involved and join JDCA in advocating for our values, including in our state chapters and as members of JDCA. But please also support us today by texting Joe to 243-725 now. 2020 was a testament to the power and perseverance of Jewish Americans, and we will continue this critical work next year and every year after. Tonight, you'll hear from so many friends of JDCA, and I'll be back at the end of the evening for a few closing words, and yes, one last time to ask for your support. But until then, it's my pleasure to introduce Delaware's second most famous resident, my former boss and the current chairman of the menschiest non-Jew on the Hill caucus, Senator Chris Coons.
Hi, I'm U.S. Senator Chris Coons from Delaware, and I'd like to thank the Jewish Democratic Council of America for its strong support of the election of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and other Democrats, including now Senators-elect John Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock. The Democratic Party has long been, and I pray will continue to be, the political home for American Jews because our policies are rooted in shared values. This past week has demonstrated the need for faith and for never giving up on the fight for our values. The inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will demonstrate that after darkness can come light. Joe is a man of faith and will continue our march towards justice, inspired by respect for the dignity of all people and all faiths. His values come from those who raised him and inspired in him a passion for justice. His faith is about our future, about a world with less suffering. He believes in bringing people together to tackle our challenges, rebuild our country, and restore our humanity. This election truly was a battle for the soul of our nation, but you all have ensured that Democrats have a chance to move us forward by taking back the Senate and the White House. Our nation will begin that restoration in just 3 days, a journey to heal and rebuild. And with Joe Biden in the White House, we will continue to look to you to ensure that our values inform and shape our work together to deliver for the American people. Thank you.
Joining us now, Mark Elias.
It's not an exaggeration to say that perhaps no single person has done more to combat Donald Trump's attempt to steal the election than Chief Democratic Election Lawyer Mark Elias.
I search your Twitter feed for the count every day of how many lawsuits the Trump campaign lost.
It's remarkable to have seen you and your colleagues basically win 60 straight here
I mean, it was amazing to see it to be a dozen straight and then 20 and then 30 and then 40, and it just keeps going. They've just lost at every level.
Mark Elias, why don't you guys put together $500 million and go hire him and get him out of your way?
The fact is that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris won a sweeping and convincing victory. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris won this election. They're going to be sworn in on January 20th at noon. And there's nothing that Donald Trump or Kayleigh McEnroe or anyone's going to do about that.
To talk about the life and legacy of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, please welcome Rabbi Lauren Holzblatt.
In the chambers of Justice Ginsburg hung a framed piece of art that read, Tzedek, Tzedek Tirdof, justice, justice, you must pursue. A command in the 16th chapter of Deuteronomy, a command to pursue justice every single day. This was how Justice Ginsburg lived her life. Justice did not arrive like a lightning bolt, but rather through dogged persistence. Real change, she said, enduring change, happens one step at a time. That is why she fought case after case for equality, 6 times before the Supreme Court as an advocate, then serving as a judge on the DC Circuit, and eventually as a justice on the Supreme Court. Pursuing justice took resilience, persistence, and a commitment to never stop. As a lawyer, she won equality for women and men, not in one swift victory, but brick by brick, case by case, through meticulous, careful lawyering. She changed the course of American law, and even when her views did not prevail, she still fought. This award today that is being given to Mark Elias represents so much of what Justice Ginsburg stood for. In this past election, Mark fought for a free and fair election for all Americans and for access to the right to vote. Mark said, and I quote, "Leading up to the election, we saw the enactment of rules and laws intended to prevent people from voting in a pandemic, as well as an unprecedented effort to disenfranchise voters in court. In short, we are committed to restoring and expanding democracy to help form a more perfect union." Listening to Mark's words, I heard the echo of my hero, Justice Ginsburg. In one of her most powerful dissents, in Shelby versus Holder, a case that ripped the heart out of the Voting Rights Act, Justice Ginsburg suggested a simple analogy to illustrate why the regional protections of the Voting Rights Act were still necessary. She wrote, and I quote, that throwing out preclearance when it has worked and is continuing to work to stop discriminatory changes is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you are not getting wet. Justice Ginsburg fought for equality, protection for men and women, for voting rights, and for a better, more equitable America. Mark is continuing this legacy. May we together continue to pursue justice in every corner of America. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Holzblatt, for your beautiful words. It is now my honor to introduce Mark Elias and present him with the Jewish Democratic Council of America's first ever Ruth Bader Ginsburg Justice Award. Nearly 3 years ago, Justice Ginsburg spoke before an adoring group of congregants at Rabbi Holzblatt's synagogue, Hadassah Israel, in our nation's capital. Invoking the words of her bubby, Justice Ginsburg told the audience, quote, "A Jew is what a Jew does," close quote. That as a people, we live our faith when we pursue justice. It's hard to think of someone who embodies this philosophy more than Mark Elias. This is a man of relentless doing. And I'm not just talking about his Twitter feed, which has over 431,000 followers, with reporters even admitting that that's how they keep up with the barrage of post-election lawsuits. Long before Mark became America's most highly rated voting rights advocate, he argued dozens of election law cases before state Supreme Courts, federal courts, and even the US Supreme Court. He's represented the Democratic National Committee, advised campaigns of dozens of senators, governors, and representatives, and served as general counsel to Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign in 2016. But perhaps most importantly, Mark has been a tireless advocate for voting rights. Since the beginning of his career, he has led the charge against unjust redistricting, voter suppression, and campaign finance laws. Just this past year, as the pandemic threatened our right to a safe election, Mark established the 4 pillars, helping a record number of Americans vote by mail. And vote by mail we did. In fact, we're here today because of vote by mail. Mark created the resource center Democracy Docket, which offered vital information about voting rights in the lead up to the election. In fact, his practice argued 150 voter disenfranchisement cases in 30 states, winning 122 of them and protecting America's right to vote. When Joe Biden won the presidency, thanks in large part to those efforts, Mark still refused to rest. As Trump tried to steal our election, it was Mark who stood guard at the gates of our democracy. He's won 64 legal victories against Trump's baseless claims of voter fraud. From one lawyer to another, Mark, that's what we call crushing it, and the stakes could not have been higher. Through his work, his wisdom, and his wit, he carries forward the legacy of Justice Ginsburg, including as a jurist guided by his Jewish values. Mark, for protecting our democracy and ensuring that every vote counts, it is my distinct honor and pleasure on behalf of JDCA to present you with the first ever Jewish Democratic Council of America Ruth Bader Ginsburg Justice Award. Congratulations, Mark. You earned it.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone. I want to show the wonderful award and thank you so much for it. And I want to start by thanking you, Ron and Haley, and everyone with Jewish Democrats for all of your tireless work to not just make it a more just and a fairer society, but to help elect Democrats up and down the ticket. Starting on at 12:02 or 12:01, I guess, on January 20th, we will have a Democratic president and vice president. We will also, due to your efforts, continue to have a Democratic House and 2 new Democratic senators in the state of Georgia, which will flip the control of the Senate from Republican to Democratic. So I can't say enough about all of the hard work on the ground that you all have done and how invaluable you have been to all of these efforts. So let me start by saying when I first became familiar with the organization, the first thing that went through my mind is, as someone who grew up in New York, first on Long Island and then in Rockland County, I wasn't aware, growing up at least, that there were any Jews that weren't Democrats. So it struck me that an organization for Jewish Democrats must have been around for forever. But then I learned that, in fact, the organization has really grown and flourished in the last few years. And my main takeaway today for everyone is the fight has not ended. So we cannot let resistance be the end goal. Like many of you, I began the Trump era with a tweet that said, I will resist by electing Democrats fighting for voting rights, fair districting, and government transparency. And then I hashtagged it resist 2020. And for the last 4 years, I, along with many of you out there, have seen our primary mission as to make sure that whether it is in immigration, where Trump treated children with barbarity, or whether it is in the sphere of voting, where he and his team mounted an effort to simply undermine our democracy at every turn, we saw our mission as one of fighting back and of resisting. And of course, Jews make really good resistors, right? You go back and look and the Israelites and the Maccabees, the story of Esther, and are all stories of Jewish resistance. You look at the Jews through the ages, the Inquisition, the pogroms, and of course Nazi Germany, and you see heroic acts of Jewish resistance. And so we make natural resistors, but there is another part to Judaism, which is that we strive for justice, and we strive for justice for all. So as we move now from the Trump era into the Biden era, it is important that we not stop the fight for voting rights. There are a lot of things going on in the world. We have a pandemic, we have an economic crisis, we have crises involving the environment, we have crises involving immigration and other things. But we continue to have in this country a crisis of democracy. And it is a crisis that was brought on by years of neglect, compounded by intentional bad acts by President Trump, and now by an entire political party that is beholden to Trumpism. Trumpism, remember, began as a racist lie against the first Black president, and it expanded now to want to disenfranchise millions and millions of voters. Never forget that 17 attorneys general and 128 Republican members of Congress went to the U.S. Supreme Court to throw out every single vote in 4 states. And I was happy and proud to have represented the Biden campaign and the Democratic Party in fighting those post-election battles. But now the next set of battles are in front of us. Justice Ginsburg, in her last published opinion on voting, wrote this. She said, "Ensuring an opportunity for the people to exercise their vote should be our paramount concern." Justice Ginsburg cared deeply about voting, not just in Shelby County, not just in this case, which was towards the end of her life, but in every case, she cared about people's participation in the democratic process. And we as Democrats and we as Jews need to find space as we move forward to continue these fights. Georgia right now is set to consider and potentially enact a rollback to all vote by mail, except for a limited number of people with an excuse. They are talking about doing away with ballot drop boxes, a controversy I would never have seen coming. If you would ask me what was on my 2020 bingo card for the war on voting, I would not have said a war on drop boxes. They are set to tighten the state's already strict ID laws. So we have challenges in front of us on how we fight and continue to fight against voter suppression. But on the other side, we need to embrace the need for reforms that make voting easier, so that it's not just a question of stopping bad things, but actually promoting good things. We need to make sure that voters who want to vote by mail are able to, but also people who want to vote in person should be able to do so without waiting in line. You know, we sued Georgia over the length of their lines in the primary, and what they found is that if you were Black at the end of the day, you on average waited in line 28 minutes. If you were white, you waited 6. Okay, we can't have a functioning, fair democracy. And as Jews, we cannot accept a system in which white people wait 6 minutes and Black people wait 28 minutes. And yet that is something we see throughout, from state to state throughout our society. So I would ask all of you to join in making sure that we don't exhale. We all need to exhale on at 12:01 and be like, okay, Joe Biden is now president, Kamala Harris is now vice president. But then we can't set aside the business of democracy for another 2 years or another 4 years. It needs to be our business every day, because unless we recommit ourselves to rebuilding it and strengthening it, another Trump will come along in the Republican Party, or the same Trump may come along in the Republican Party. And we need to fight every day to prevent that. Let me just end with the words that Kamala Harris ended her convention speech in 2020. She concluded by saying, "Let's fight with conviction. Let's fight with hope. Years from now, this moment will have passed, and our children, our grandchildren will look in our eyes and ask, 'Where were you when the stakes were so high?' They will ask us, 'What was it like?' We will tell them not just how we felt, we will tell them what we did." And all of you are doers. You are all in the fight. And you will be able to tell your children and your children's children that at this time of peril, at this time when our democracy is at stake, you stood up in the town square and made a difference. So thank you so much for the award. I cannot tell you how meaningful it is. And Ron, thank you for everything you're doing and the organization is doing to promote Democrats and Jewish participation on behalf of Democrats. And thank you, Hallie, as well, who I don't see, but I hope is listening because she is a total rock star in everything. So thank you.
You've got young Jewish man, African-American pastor running together with shared values, shared commitment. As I think about it, I think about Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, two Jews and an African-American who died fighting for voting rights. I think about Martin Luther King Jr. and Abraham Joshua Heschel. Heschel said, when I marched with Dr. King, I felt like my legs were praying. And in this moment, what we need is praying legs, praying feet to redeem the soul of America. Good afternoon, and thank you so very much to the Jewish Democratic Council of America. I'm grateful for the ways in which you supported me and stood by me throughout our recent campaign. And I'm very excited about the work that we will do together to expand access to affordable health care, to continue to fight for a livable wage, to support the strong relationship between the United States of America and our ally Israel, to continue to struggle for peace in the Middle East and throughout the world. As we come together, we are mindful of the long-standing relationship between the African American community and the Jewish community, our shared values, our sense of struggle for justice, for peace in the world. As we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday this weekend, we remember him and those who fought alongside him. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, when he marched with Dr. King, said, I felt like my legs were praying. In the days ahead, we need to pray with our legs, pray with our lips, pray with our hands and our feet. We have work to do. And as we do that work, we bless the memory of Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, two Jews and an African American who died standing up for justice. And as we move forward, what a glimpse of hope that in this moment, the state of Georgia is sending to the United States Senate an African American man, pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Dr. King served, and John Ossoff, a young Jewish man, the son of an immigrant, to represent the great state of Georgia in the United States Senate. Our legacy of shared value and commitment and work continues. I look forward to working with you in the days ahead. God bless you. Keep the faith. Keep looking up.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here and to follow my good friend, Reverend Warnock. Deepest gratitude to the Jewish Democratic Council of America. Thank you for all that you did to power us to these two historic victories in Georgia. I want to thank, in particular, Haley Soifer and Ron Klein for all of your help, your guidance, your inspiration, and your support over these last several months of intense effort here in the Peach State, where we have delivered two victories and the Senate majority, thanks to effort that involved tens of thousands of volunteers, over 1 million grassroots small dollar donors, and folks across all of Georgia's 159 counties and across the country chipping in to ensure that this incoming administration have the capacity to legislate and sending a message about the kind of values that Georgia stands for. And I think that as we honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and consider this moment in our nation's history and this moment in Georgia's history, it also causes me to reflect upon the relationship that I had with one of Dr. King's proteges, Congressman John Lewis. And Congressman Lewis was a friend and a mentor to me and to Reverend Warnock. And some of you have heard me tell this story, but I think it's particularly fitting that I tell today about the very first meal that I shared with Congressman Lewis. I was a very, very young Jewish man working for a great civil rights hero, a legend, a figure of such incredible significance and power and importance and inspiration as John Lewis. And the first time we sat down for a meal, he wanted to talk to me about the historic alliance between the Black and Jewish communities in the United States and the American South and in the state of Georgia. And of course, representing Georgia's 5th congressional district as he did, he had many Black and Jewish constituents. He represented the temple, which is the congregation where I was bar mitzvahed. And he talked to me about how it was 1957 when Dr. King established the SCLC in Atlanta, and 1958 when the temple was bombed, in part for its opposition to white supremacy. And he talked to me about how Jews and Blacks had marched arm in arm, and he had marched alongside Jewish activists during the civil rights movement. And he talked to me about how the day after he was brutally beaten to within an inch of his life on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, and Dr. King had come to see him, where he was being tended to by nuns in and out of consciousness, beaten and gassed like so many for daring to demand the right to vote for Black Americans, that Dr. King had told him not to worry because he had put out the word, and there were clergy from all faiths descending on Selma to walk again across that bridge in a demonstration of solidarity. And Congressman Lewis talked to me about the special relationship that had emerged between Dr. King and Rabbi Heschel. And I say all of this to say that here on this King Day, and addressing this great institution, and thank you again for the hospitality and the invitation, I know that Congressman Lewis is looking down on us in Georgia right now and smiling, because the state of Georgia, the heart of the old Confederacy, and the cradle of the civil rights movement, will be represented in just a few days in the United States Senate by the young Jewish son of an immigrant and a Black pastor who holds Dr. King's pulpit at Ebenezer Baptist Church. And if you're looking for reason for optimism and hope, if you're looking for evidence that we can and must recommit and reinvest and rededicate ourselves to this great American project, to the ideas that the country stands for, the highest founding ideals that this country is on a journey toward fully realizing, of equality in God's eyes and equal justice for all, then what's happened in Georgia the last few months should, I hope, give you comfort and encouragement and put a little spring in your step. So thank you again for the opportunity to address you. Thank you for all of your support. I wish you all good health. Much love from Georgia.
My name is Deborah Tenenbaum.
Adam Rosen.
I'm Sharon.
Josh Iger.
I'm Susan Friedenberg.
My name is Julian Gurney.
Along came the Jewish Democratic Council of America with a call to action in my email box. I clicked on it and read about it and immediately knew it was calling to me.
I think it's so important to be a part of JDCA and to extend our reach in our community.
In the past, I didn't know how to get involved. I was unsure. JDCA came into my life. I felt connected.
It was much more than phone calls.
Speakers just blew my mind. And I just felt so proud, whether they were Jewish or not Jewish, just to be a part of this and to know that I was doing something to help them to make a difference.
We've created over 15 chapters across the country, recruited thousands of volunteers to our events, to our volunteer opportunities, and we really have become like a family.
I phone bank with Jewish Dems because it's my way to express my passion for the importance of voting.
I spoke to somebody whose husband had Alzheimer's, and she had no idea how she could make his vote count. And we were able to work with her with the voter hotlines and the information we were provided. And absolutely, her husband was able to vote.
I was well armed with information and instructions, and it was everything I needed to make effective phone calls.
It's really incredible to see all of these passionate volunteers ready to phone bank, ready to call as many voters as they can, asking questions to help them make better calls.
I remember after my first call, I looked around my kitchen and I literally got up on my feet and gave it one of those, yes!
I just want to thank everyone.
Thank you to JDCA. Thank you for every call.
All the hard work, for the commitment to turn our country around. Thank God for groups like this.
Thank you to the volunteers. Thank you to JDCA. Thank you to everyone who played a role.
Please welcome our special guest, comedian, actress, singer, writer, Sarah Silverman.
Thanks. Hola, shalom, y'all. I have been asked to speak about what the election of Joe Biden means to me, given my Jewish values. I've always kind of both understood and not understood what that means, Jewish values. I mean, to be completely honest, some of the most ethical people I know are godless. Many of them godless Jews. You know, Jews can be godless and still Jewish. I love that, personally. So that's when you say, what is it to be Jewish? Are we a religion? Are we a race? Are we an ethnicity? Are we a culture? Are we a floor wax or a dessert topping? I don't know, probably all of them. But, you know, like scrambling an egg or just throwing your hair up in a messy bun, you just gotta feel for it. I don't know if that was the best analogy ever, possibly not. Biden's election was a massive relief, a moment to exhale and regroup. But in many ways, now the fight begins, and no one knows this more than Mark Elias. The incredibly powerful combination of patience and persistence and chutzpah that he embodies is what I imagine carries him through what he's done and what he's doing, all the while communicating and recruiting and including everyone and anyone who could lend a hand in protecting our democracy. I would classify that as Jewish values. So no matter who you are, what race, religion, gender, genderless, if you embody these things, you are a mensch. So congratulations, Mark, and thank you so much. Over to you, Haley.
Thank you, Sarah. This year marks the 13-year anniversary of Sarah leading the Great Schlep, when we all convinced our bubbies and zadies in Florida to support Barack Obama. And in honor of the Great Schlep's bar or bat mitzvah, we're thrilled that in this past election, we launched a virtual Schlep that flipped the Senate and the White House blue. So mazel tov to everyone on this call for playing a role. And thank you to all of you for joining us today, from our new senators-elect from Georgia to Rabbi Browse and Holtzblatt, to Sarah Silverman and Senator Coons, to our honoree and protector of our democracy, Mark Elias, and to those who have shared their voices, Alana, and soon you'll hear from David Broza. We are so grateful that they're all a part of the JDCA family. And of course, thank you to everyone who helped us win in 2020. The fact that we're here just days from the inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris is because of all of you. Days before the November election, Senator Booker joined us and told us all to answer the call to action. Well, we all answered, and the voters heard our calls, and we are so grateful. But calls to action will continue, and JDCA is here to keep this momentum going, from mobilizing voters to influencing policy to protecting our democracy and advocating for our values. JDCA will continue to build on everything we have built and work hand in hand with our new president and vice president to truly build back better. And there is so much to rebuild. That's where all of you come in. In 2021, we're offering different levels of JDCA membership, and we'll follow up with each of you about that soon. But in the meantime, today, if you'd like to support our efforts, text Joe to 243-725. Now, to celebrate a new beginning with a new White House and ring in the better days that lie ahead, I'll turn it over to JDCA's Program Director, Bobby Saferstein, who will lead us in the Shehechianu.
Thank you, Haley. And thank you to everyone at home for being a part of our JDCA family. My name is Bobby Saferstein, and we hope you enjoy tonight's program. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. As we mark Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. weekend and celebrate the inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, the words of Dr. King have never been more clear. We know the work is far from over, but together we can build a better future for us all, one full of life and promise, light and love. Now, as is our Jewish tradition for marking new beginnings, I invite you to raise a glass and join in as we express our gratitude for reaching this moment. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. L'chaim.
Thank you so much for being with us on this important day. We'll close with a song about the promise and the hope of a new future. Please join me in singing One Day. Sometimes I lay under the moon and thank God that I'm breathing. And I pray, don't take me soon, 'cause I am here for a reason. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more wars and the children will play. One day, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day. Try with me, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more wars and the children will say, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day. Keep singing one day, one day, one day, one day. Yeah, one day, one day, one day.
And now, as a special surprise to close our program, please welcome acclaimed singer David Broza singing his hit song, Yihye Tov.
Good evening, everybody. I'm very happy to take part in this inaugural event. I'd like to thank the JDCA and everybody involved. And I will dedicate this song in Hebrew, saying, Yihye Tov, things will be better. and they will be better. אני מביט מהחלום, וזה עושה לי די עצוב. האביב חלף עבר לו, מי יודע אם ישוב. הליצן היה למלך, הנביא נהיה ליצן, ושכחתי את הדרך, אבל אני עוד כאן, ויהיה טוב, יהיה טוב, כן. לפעמים אני נשבר, אז הלילה, הלילה, איתך אני נשאר. ילדים לובשים כנפיים, ועפים אל הצבא, ואחרי שנתיים הם חוזרים ללא תשובה. אנשים חיים במתח, מחפשים סיבה לנשום, ובין שנאה לרצח מדברים על השלום. ויהיה טוב, יהיה טוב, כן. לפעמים אני נשבר, אז הלילה, הלילה, איתך אני נשאר. כן, שם למעלה בשמיים עננים לומדים לעוף, ואני מביט למעלה ורואה מטוס חטוף. ממשלה של גנרלים מחלקת את הנוף לשלהם ולשלנו, מתי נראה את הסוף? אוי, אבא נשיא מצרים, איך שמחתי לקראתו, פירמידות בעיניים ושלום במקטרתו, ואמרנו היי בוא נשלימה ונחיה כמו אחים. ואז הוא אמר קדימה, רק תצאו מהשטחים, ויהיה טוב, או יהיה טוב, כן. לפעמים אני נשבר, אז הלילה, הלילה, איתך אני נשאר. Well, this song was written many years ago, back in 1977, upon the signing of peace agreement with Egypt. Just want to add one verse, since those days we added many verses, myself and my friend Jonathan Geffen, the poet who wrote the lyrics. This one I will share with you and dedicate to where we're standing now here in the United States. This one says that we shall learn to live together under the olive trees, and the children will grow up knowing no more wars, no terror, no conflict, no frontiers, and that fresh new grass will grow over the graveyards for love and peace. After 100 years of war, we haven't and will not lose hope. עוד נלמד לחיות ביחד בין חורשות עצי זיתים, ילדים יחיו בלי פחד, בלי גבולות, בלי מקלטים, על קברים יפרח העשב לשלום ואהבה. 100 שנים של חרב, ועוד לא אבדה התקווה. ויהיה טוב, יהיה טוב, כן. לפעמים אני נשבר, אז הלילה, for better days.